How did this ranch ever even wind up on your radar?
It's an unlikely story. I was skeptical, but willing to listen. We're simultaneously advising an elusive billionaire out of Las Vegas named Robert Bigelow, asking if I would be interested in having a discussion and a meeting regarding a ranch in northeastern Utah known as Skinwalker Ranch.
You didn't have any idea how much activity was actually happening there?
The ranch was part of a Pentagon-funded black budget program.
I found Skinwalker Ranch from a buddy of mine that I used to work with at CIA. He passed me the program and I dove in and I've been infatuated with it ever since. And there's so much going on there. You have cattle mutilations, you have radiation spikes, you have more UAP, UFO activity than anywhere else I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
You have all these weird injuries happening to people that out there. I mean, how did this ranch ever even wind up on your radar?
Well, it's an unlikely story. But about 13 years ago, I was funding an advanced physics effort. We'd actually transformed a large percentage of our hangar facility, of our family's aviation management and hangar facility at the Provo Airport, into an engineering lab testing physics theories, dealing with gravitational physics. It was an interesting effort, was something I did not publicize, and we ultimately, using scientific rigor and discipline, disproved the core claims and the theories that were being advanced. But through that effort...
Hold on. What got you interested in that?
Yeah, it was a former client. So I had a client that I represented back in the mid-'90s that was a genius software development executive that ended up forming a company that became the world's leading internet consulting firm. And he left that firm ultimately to fund efforts relative to the UFO phenomena. He had claimed that he had his own experience, had been visited. I found it all to be quite unbelievable, but I could not deny his success in business. I'd had the privilege of negotiating his first headquarters transaction and working with him at a young age. And when reconnecting with him in late 2009, going into 2010, he claimed that he'd spent tens of millions of dollars focused on really discovering the technology or the principle of action that would enable gravity, anti-gravity and energy. I was skeptical, but willing to listen. He was a very celebrated, respected tech mogul in his 20s, in the 90s. I mean, he sold his first company to Novell as a teenager, and as I'd mentioned, he'd built the world's largest internet consulting firm.
Wow.
That I had the privilege of advising and working with. So hearing his claims, I was intrigued. I was willing to invest, even willing to devote some of our facilities and resources to the effort. Well, it ended up becoming a very challenging endeavor, but through that experience, I developed relationships with a team of science advisors that, unbeknownst to me, were simultaneously advising an elusive billionaire out of Las Vegas named Robert Bigelow, of Bigelow Aerospace, who as a real estate developer and entrepreneur was a kindred spirit of sorts. And so following the closure of that research project back in 2013, I was surprised to receive a call from the two senior science advisors that had been on our board with the question, asking if I would be interested in having a discussion and a meeting with Mr. Bigelow regarding a ranch in northeastern Utah known as Skinwalker Ranch. They asked me if I'd heard of this place. I told them, yeah, I was familiar with a book that had been published, back in the mid 2000s called Hunt for the Skinwalker. I chuckled and told them, I didn't know that there was any truth to it, but I remember it being an entertaining read at the time. But I told them, I said, that I'm a skeptic. I've never seen a UFO, a ghost orb. You're also aware that I just concluded funding a project where we, by using scientific rigor and discipline, debunked the core claims. And I'm really not interested in these fringe topics. And I happen to believe that there's most likely a natural prosaic explanation for the claims that are being made. Well, they proceeded to say, well, Brandon, there's a lot more going on than meets the eye, and you as a real estate mogul and advisor in the Intermountain West, seem to be a potential fit to joint venture or at least have a discussion with Mr. Bigelow. And I agreed. I jumped at the chance to at least have a meeting, to have a discussion, flew down to Las Vegas and found myself at Mr. Bigelow's Bigelow Aerospace compound, which is the closest thing to a James Bond villain lair that I've ever seen. I mean, it's an incredible facility. I mean, huge buildings that house full-size space stations and space habitats that have been designed where they're doing the materials science and the life safety testing and engineering to really position Bigelow Aerospace, at least at the time, to be the real estate development company of space.
Wow.
And Mr. Bigelow had an interest in potentially selling the Utah property. He had expressed not only willingness to consider the sale, but the fact that he was very busy and occupied with negotiating deals with SpaceX and NASA and others, playing a key role in the private space race. We had a great visit, and I think developed a good relationship. I told him that I was a skeptic, that I'd never seen a UFO or a ghost or orb or anything of the sort, and that I would be bringing in my own team. I also asked him for any of the data, and he said, well, I'm selling the property on an as-is basis. I'm not willing to turn over any data, not only because the ranch was part of a Pentagon-funded black budget program between 2007 and 2013, but he went on to say that he felt that he wanted to keep that private, and I agreed. At the end of the day, I felt that starting with a clean slate would help me establish a baseline, and most likely help me even better establish that there was a natural explanation for the reports.
You wanted a clean slate. You didn't want the previous data or research?
No, I didn't push. I asked respectfully, and I respected his response and his request.
Did he? So was he unable to pass the research and the data because it was a black budget program, or did he just wasn't willing to share?
Yeah, I think it was both.
Time doesn't slow down, and really, you shouldn't either. We all sit around and say, oh, I'll get to that later, but some things shouldn't wait, like protecting your family's financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance you can get done today. It's made for busy parents like you, all online, on your schedule, right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. Fabric has flexible, high-quality policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. If you have kids, and especially if you're young and healthy, the time to lock in low rates is now. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/srclips. That's meetfabric.com/srclips. meetfabric.com/srclips. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Did he want you to continue the research at the ranch?
I think he saw in me a worthy successor as someone who would at least be the appropriate owner taking it forward, given my real estate background, proximity to the ranch. I live about 2.5 hours away. It's only about a 45-minute flight via helicopter. And he had heard positive things about me from his science advisors. His science advisors had told him that I had managed the project that we had shared in common with professionalism, and I think that that meant something to him. He was not putting the property up on the market for sale. I mean, the property was never offered or marketed for sale. This was a very private transaction, private dialogue, and I told him that I would acquire the property so long as my identity would be kept confidential. And I worked with my legal counsel to structure the entities that would shield my identity. In fact, my name wasn't on any of the paperwork by design. I had registered agents that managed that process and truly wanted to stay below the radar and not have my identity associated with the ranch in any way.
What year was this?
2016.
2016?
So I closed on the property the first week in April 2016 and proceeded to bring in my own team and assess really whether there was any reality to the claims that were being made. At the time, I was on the board of the National Parks Council, the Boy Scouts of America, and honestly was intending to donate it to the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts for a potential site that where those experiences it could be had, because I didn't think that there was anything truly unusual. I felt like my investigation and research would ultimately confirm that there was nothing paranormal or disturbing about this incredible piece of property. And so when I flew in and saw the property for the first time, I was shocked at how strikingly beautiful the landscape was. As the helicopter came in and I was looking over at my brother who was piloting and looking back at Jim Morse, who I was recruiting to come in and be really the face of the property at the time and be the ranch manager and the community liaison, I was taken aback by how beautiful the property was and the diversity of the landscape. Here you have this red rock mesa that runs the entire expanse of the property from east to west. You have waterways that bisect the property. You have these old pioneer homesteads that are still standing that provide a very unique, interesting backdrop, and it is a working ranch. I mean, there has been cattle brought on and off the property periodically, and I've maintained that use through my stewardship over the course of the last 7+ years as well. And so when I flew into the property, I was just shocked at how beautiful it was. You could shoot any number of Hollywood films, of John Wayne westerns on this property, or even Westworld, which is a favorite of mine. It's that diverse and that strikingly unique. And I proceeded to engage professionals to bring in a superintendent within days, Thomas Winterton, who helped assess the physical facilities and what we needed to do in order to install certain things. And we had caretakers at the time. I had a professional, an ex-Marine, who was a drone expert that was tasked with not only conducting drone surveillance of the property, but also developing a historical record of the landscape to better understand every inch of this 512-acre assemblage.
How so when you took over, when you took possession of Skinwalker Ranch, you didn't have any idea how much activity was actually happening there?
No,
On top of that, you were a skeptic. You had mentioned last night that you had purchased Skinwalker Ranch to basically debunk the entire UFO UAP topic. So what I'm curious about is how does somebody that has been conducting experiments with the US government on a black budget program, who very much believes in all of these phenomenons that are happening, how do you determine the value when you're selling to a skeptic who wants to acquire it to debunk the entire operation?
Yeah, it's a negotiation. It's subjective, but I think Mr. Bigelow knew that I was respectful. He knew that I would handle the property with care, with respect. I think that he respected my desire for anonymity, for privacy. I didn't tell my family. My family, my closest business partners were purposely out of the loop and unaware of my acquisition and this new venture by design. So it was an interesting launch to the saga that continues to unfold with Skinwalker Ranch. In the first several months, we dealt with primarily challenges dealing with dilapidated infrastructure. We had a septic system that wasn't working, that was backed up. I found quickly we didn't have adequate power infrastructure to be able to secure the property. We had no fiber optic connectivity to be able to effectively conduct a more advanced investigation. So the first several months, I coordinated with Thomas Winterton and Jim Morse and my caretakers and other advisors to address the infrastructure issues of this property. It was very, very run down. There was no command center. There was no technology. The reports that Mr. Bigelow received on a weekly basis were sent via fax. There was a fax machine. In 2016, there was a fax machine that was the primary technology used for disseminating reports relative to activity at the ranch, believe it or not. And I was surprised to find that the ranch was in that state. I was also surprised to find that on the perimeter fence line, there were animal body parts. There were animal bladders hanging from the fence line when I was first shown the property by exiting Bigelow security. And I asked the security, I said, what is the nature of, what the hell is that? Why are those things hanging from the fence line perimeter of the property? And the security at the time looked at me with a straight face and said, look, the Native American neighbors that surround this property place these animal bladders on the fence line and bless them to keep the demonic spirits and entities inside this property and off of their property. And I quickly learned that the tribal leaders in the Uinta Basin and surrounding the property had been telling their people not to even look the way of the ranch, that they were told, don't even look the way of the property, or else you may have demonic forces, entities that would follow you. And And that's something that has been discussed and documented, but is an interesting part of the history. So I was very surprised when first inspecting the property and visiting the property at what I found. After a couple of months, my surveyor contacted me one day with a report that he'd just captured the image of a UFO. It was right about noon in June of 2016. And I said, "Really? Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah, I have it on my camera." And I told him, "Will you stop everything right now? Don't talk to anyone else. Drive straight to my office because I want the metadata. I want to download that picture without it being corrupted, without it being compromised. I want it directly on my graphic director's computer to be analyzed if you really believe that you've captured something." And so he did. He drove 2.5 hours straight to my office in Salt Lake City and downloaded that image right there in front of me, with my graphics director. We still have the metadata, and it was an interesting image. In fact, it reminded me of the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars fame.
Really?
And it was interesting. I checked the flight records to see if there was any activity, any commercial or private air traffic that would match up with that in the basin during that time that again corresponded to that metadata, and there was none. And it was intriguing. Was I convinced that the UFO phenomena was real? That there was some extraordinary cause or origin to this? No. But I was intrigued. Several weeks later, I get another call. "Brandon, I've got another image. Myself and the caretakers just saw a glowing object appear right outside of Homestead 1 or right outside of the ranch house, and I've got the images, and I need to show you this." And I told them, "Drive straight to my office. Please get here as fast as you can." And sure enough, it was an intriguing image. We had the metadata. It was very different than the UFO that was captured weeks before.
How so?
It had a different shape, different characteristics.
Do you still have these images?
I'll share those with you. You bet.
We'll put them up on screen.
You bet. And those created some interest. I still was unconvinced. I mean, we have the Utah Test and Training Range out west of Hill Air Force Base. I mean, I've worked as the commercial real estate advisor to Falcon Hill and that aerospace research park, and I'm aware that there are programs that are out there and there are tests being conducted that could very well be potentially connected with some of the unidentified aerial phenomena that have been reported. So I remained curious but unconvinced. And then in October of 2016, I received a call from one of my advisors saying that a certain individual, a prominent doctor out of Las Vegas, who had been working on Area 51, had been a consulting physician to Area 51, had as his number one request, his number one wish on his life bucket list, to visit Skinwalker Ranch.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.